Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's having a great day. The sun isn't shining quite yet here in St. John's, but hopefully we'll see some sun very soon. My name is Tina Mulrooney, and I work with the Community Sector Council here in St. John's. And today's webinar is going to be how to discipline employees fairly. I'm going to get right down to business, as I know it's 2:01 there now. And I'm just looking at the attendee list. Everyone seems to be entering the room. So that's great. Just a few quick housekeeping items. I just wanted to let you know that anytime throughout this presentation today, you can write in the question box. It should be there in your little control panel with the GoToWebinar. So if you have any questions at any time, please write them there. I'm also going to do a couple of little fun polls. So it's just a question to get you engaged. And all you need to do with that is select the option that suits your answer. So it'll be something just to make it exciting, if you will, as we go through the slides, because I know it's a lot of information coming at you at once, and it can keep it a little bit interesting. And as well, at the end, I'm sure we'll have a few minutes to do a little discussion. Keep in mind this session will be recorded for our website and to be able to provide this resource after the fact. So I also have on this webinar some handouts. So I have this PowerPoint included in the handout section. As well, I have a resource sheet. So all the sources that I use to make this PowerPoint are available on the resource sheet. If you do need this at any time, I can certainly send it to you if you're unable to download it right now on your screen. Other than that, sit back, enjoy the session. Hopefully you've got a coffee or a tea or water. I've got my tea ready to go. So I'll get started now. And nobody can be heard, only myself. I just want to let you know that. And we are recording so that we can have this for a later time for a resource. So my name is Tina Mulrooney, and I'm not going to go into any great detail. This is just a quick picture of me. It's typically what they do with webinars. I'm a HR specialist here at the Community Sector Council, Newfoundland and Labrador, and I'm hired as part of the Creative HR 18-month pilot project. One of my main objectives is to provide learning opportunities to the nonprofit sector. So this webinar itself was actually developed as a result of requests from nonprofit organizations. So I do know that we have a lot of different organizations attending today, and we actually have some students from CNA attending as far as I know. So it's really great to have you here and have a really great audience to present this to today. I won't go into any great detail, but I just wanted to highlight that I've got previous experience in the banking industry and also in the oil and gas industry in Newfoundland and Labrador. I've always been a people person, and I've always been involved in the people function or the human resources function within these organizations. My background is a Master of Employment Relations at Memorial University, and prior to that I completed my Bachelor of Commerce with a focus in human resources. So that's a little bit about me, and I won't continue to go on. I'm actually wondering who we have on the line here today, so I'm going to launch a quick poll, and I want to know, how are you related to a nonprofit organization? So I want to know if you're paid staff, a volunteer, or other. So this should come up on your screen there now, and it'll alert me when everyone has voted. All right, we're almost done there now, so if people are listening, all I need you to do is just click the button that applies to you. I'm just trying to get an idea of who's in the room, or this online virtual room, should I say. All right, so we're almost done the voting. If anyone hasn't voted yet, I just ask that you click your response on the screen. All right, we're up to 95% voted. There's just a few others that need to click the screen there now. Just ask that you kindly do that, and then I'll just show you the responses. Right now we're at 89% paid staff, 11% other, and 0% volunteer. All right, so I'm not sure. There's 5% that aren't selecting responses, so I'm going to close the poll. So thanks for those that responded, and hopefully I'll get the rest by the next poll. Okay, so you can see 89% were paid staff, 0% volunteer, and 11% other. Okay. So we're going to go back to the presentation there now. So there's some important notes I want to go through quickly before we go through the slides. I just wanted to start off by saying the information contained in these slides is simply just meant to be informative in nature. So we are not providing any legal advice here. We are not advising you on anything, but we're hoping to provide you with materials or resources to be able to make your life a little bit easier, and so that you can make your own judgment when it comes to your own nonprofit organization that you're involved with. It's also important to note that if you read half of the presentation and you don't read all the presentation, the slides could be misleading given that it's a sensitive topic. So the topic is how to discipline employees fairly. So that can be pretty sensitive, and if you don't read it all, you won't get the full picture that I'm trying to provide to you today. Okay, so there's no questions. I just checked the box to make sure. And I wanted to highlight first for you the definition of progressive discipline. So when you hear the word discipline, you automatically think negative. I certainly know I do. This is certainly what came to me when I was reading the research. I found many different definitions of discipline, and one of the most interesting ones that I found was punishment inflicted by way of correction and training. And that sounds very negative to me. The words punishment and inflicted are, they sound painful and disrespectful in my opinion. On the hrcouncil.ca toolkit website, which I have referenced here on the slide, and I will have included in the resource list, included here online in your handout section, they define discipline as a formal process of increasingly severe consequences for dealing with issues of misconduct in the workplace. They say that increasingly severe consequences are used to give the employee incentive to improve. So that's a formal definition. So can we avoid discipline? That's a good question for everybody. Not in all situations, but we can certainly be proactive during our day-to-day roles in preventing the need for discipline. So I'm not suggesting that discipline is a bad thing, although we used those words earlier that sounded quite painful, but quite often discipline is interpreted as negative across the board. As managers or supervisors, we want to be clear about the expectations for employees. If an employee is not presented with information to help them understand the workplace expectations at the beginning of a job, it can create a lot of confusion and conflict. Appropriate supervision is very important. You need to find a balance and find something that works for the supervisor and the employee. So I'm sure we've all heard about extreme situations where there was either no direction, supervision, or support, or the opposite. Other situations where there's been far too much micromanagement or discipline. So what you want to find is a happy balance, and if you can, by proactively putting some positive steps in place, you may be able to avoid discipline as much as possible, of course. Now, whatever happened to providing feedback every day and having a normal conversation? I still believe that this is the key to workplace relationships, so I will caution you, and I'm sure you can all tell me the same, it does take time and effort on the front end, but it's very worth it in the long run to prevent conflict and to prevent issues from arising. I will say that regardless of the steps that you take to prevent having to discipline an employee, when problems with behavior or performance occur, discipline is necessary. So, I mean, time spent doing all of these things will not always result in someone behaving appropriately in the workplace. And I'm sure you could all tell me many stories, which we won't go into, about how behaviors or attitudes have not been the greatest in the workplace. So the ultimate goal of a disciplinary process is to allow employees to become a proactive part of your organization and create an opportunity for improvement. It also helps if you were to need to defend your position for disciplining an employee should you ever be in a legal environment or have to go to court. You can use your disciplinary processes, policies, and procedures and examples of discipline imposed when it's necessary to go to court. Whether this is an employee or volunteer with a nonprofit organization that is, you know, displaying bad behavior or bad manners or something that warrants discipline, it can have a negative impact on your organization if you do not follow a procedure. So we all want our coworkers to succeed and do their best. If you are responsible for other employees, like a manager or a supervisor, you can help them succeed by starting with providing them with information. You want to provide a thorough orientation at the beginning of a job. You also want to establish for your employees what is acceptable in the workplace and in a particular role within the organization. Training, coaching, and mentoring have been suggested as great ways to ensure people are successful in the job. Appropriate supervision also allows for constant feedback and conversation. It is suggested in the research that implementing a good performance management process will prove to be useful. Now, as I said, you can do everything in your power to try to prevent workplace performance issues, but there will always be a situation where an employee fails to meet expectations or participates in misconduct in the workplace. And this is why it's very important to be familiar with progressive discipline. So what are some examples of misconduct in the workplace? Inappropriate language, profane, violent, vulgar, rude, or abusive language can be considered misconduct in the workplace. Now, this is no surprise to you all, but physically touching another employee is very inappropriate behavior in the workplace. So it could actually be considered harassment if it's interpreted that way, which it's something you have no control over how others interpret your actions. So that's why you must be very careful. And when you're dealing with your employees, they need to know the expectations. These are pretty standard examples of misconduct across the board. Insubordination is an example of misconduct, and it's basically when someone is not willing to carry out something that a manager or supervisor has ordered them to do. Or it could also be considered disrespectful behavior toward a manager or a supervisor. Intoxication at work or under the influence at work is considered misconduct. I'm sure this surprises nobody here. Theft or breaching confidentiality is also considered misconduct at work. Excessive lateness, or also known as tardiness, can be considered misconduct. It's considered misconduct because it is a constant interruption of work, and technically it's a theft of time from the employer. Misconduct at work could include failing to notify the employer of your absence from work, and other examples of misconduct would include failure to abide by workplace policies or rules, or being dishonest in the workplace. So, if misconduct or bad behavior occurs in your organization, it could really damage relationships and even reputation in the community. So I just want you all to think about this for a minute. Can you think of something that happened at work that could classify as misconduct that could have really damaged a reputation? Just keep that in your mind and reflect on it. It could have a ripple effect on your organization as a whole. And there also could be, for example, a negative impact on funding, depending on how serious something could be. It could create a lot of negative client relations or impressions. if you have clients within your organization, and it could make for some really difficult situations. For the employees within a workplace that witness some form of bad behavior, it can really create low morale. I know even if there is a perception of someone not being dealt with when they should be dealt with discipline or a conversation, it creates strain in the workplace for all employees. So you might never even have a chance to remedy these situations in your organization, as turnover may result pretty quickly when things go downhill. So who is responsible in an organization, a nonprofit organization, for discipline? Quite often, this is a simple answer, the supervisor or the manager, and it could often sometimes be the CEO. So, and it could be a combination of two. It could be a supervisor and a CEO, or a manager and a CEO that must carry out the disciplinary process. So let's be reasonable here. We always refer back to the reasonable person ideology. So someone ought to have known that their behavior or actions were unacceptable, right? This is absolutely wrong. This is not always common. And they say that common sense is really not all that common, and I'm sure you would all agree. For this reason itself, it is very important to have a policy or a procedure within your organization that covers discipline. Remember, all policies must be read by, understood by, and agreed to by the employee at the time of hire, as well as any time that the policies or procedures are changed. So the language that is normally used in progressive discipline policy is failure to correct the problem may result in further disciplinary action up to and including possible termination. And of course, all of these words are not necessarily encouraging words, and they could be related to in a negative manner. The issue here is that when you punish someone, you're being very vague and you're not providing instructions on the new behavior or how to problem solve. So these were the 5 common steps found in progressive discipline policies, and the research did differ. Some had 4 steps, some had 5, so it depends on where you look. There's a lot of different opinions on discipline in the research. Some state that verbal or written warning is the first step, and some say that the second step has to be a written warning. Third step is typically suspension without pay, but sometimes some organizations have probation there before suspension. Some websites have said that this step could entail a final written warning. Having a policy that references this process is very useful. So you want to be able to clarify this process for your own organization. And when you're in doubt, define any of the words in your policy. So define what misconduct could be, provide examples, just to be able to set the expectation. You never want to have any words misinterpreted in a policy manual. Traditionally, discipline is thought to be a scary process, as we went through earlier. It creates a barrier at times to good communication when employees feel threatened. The best approach to discipline is to do so in a positive way. You want to keep discipline as respectful as possible, and you want employees to have a positive response and a further commitment to changing their behavior. This is a reasonable expectation for a disciplinary process. Now I'm just going to get you all engaged here now by doing another little poll. So we have 21 people viewing here now. I'm going to get this second poll launched and get your ideas. So bear with me. So my question is, what population of adults are responsible? Now this might be a funny poll. The next one's not so funny. So what do you think is the percentage of responsible adults? What would you naturally assume? Right, the voting is going well, so keep up the great work. And we're stuck at 95% for whatever reason of voting. So just give it another second there now for someone to respond. 100%. Excellent. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the results with you now. So the correct answer was actually 95%, and we don't have anyone that selected that response. So and 95% to me was actually very surprising. We had 15% of people think that 55% of adults are responsible, 30% of people think that 65% of adults are responsible, 40% think that 75% of adults are responsible, and 15% think that 85% is possible. And I think we're all jaded in the same way, because I was extremely surprised that it was 95%. And again, you can't always go by what's on a website as an answer, but it is actually a statistic. So thank you for answering. That was great. Very surprising to you all. I'm sure we can talk about this after. But believe it or not, 95% of adults are responsible adults. And this is from the Huffington Post. Also by the Huffington Post, by using communication, showing confidence and trust, and involving the employee in finding a solution, you will get desired results. So what they're saying with the 95% of people being responsible adults is that 95% of people will want to make a positive change should discipline be imposed on them. So in an article titled A Respectful Way to Discipline Employees, they reference the counseling approach. And I actually did double check the spelling of this one, and they indeed spelled it this way, so not the typical spelling. But the article actually said that the counseling approach is a much better approach than the traditional discipline system. So, you know, the scary traditional discipline system, when people are getting in trouble or they did something wrong, that belief that they've done something wrong. So the goal of the counseling approach is to problem solve and allow the employee to take ownership. They want the supervisor to understand the root cause and, you know, seek to understand the root cause. There needs to be two-way communication, so you want to have the employee and the supervisor or manager having an adult-to-adult conversation, and then ultimately you want a positive commitment to change behavior and improve performance. And if an employee doesn't really care or does not want to make any changes or work with the manager or supervisor about making the workplace a little bit better, then they always have that personal choice of resigning if they don't truly care. And this is a reality. I'm sure everyone has had some experience from this. I'll just show you this now. This is the chart that came directly copy and paste from this source, which is on screen. And it just shows that the traditional discipline system, the goal was to discipline. And now with the counseling approach, the goal is to problem solve. Normally in the traditional system, the supervisor owned the problem, and now they're putting it back and providing some accountability to the employee. The supervisor's mindset at one time, long ago, was to document and build a case to get rid of the employee by way of termination. But now, the positive way to do it is to understand the root cause. So you can see here it's pretty self-explanatory. The communication style has changed a lot over the last little while. Instead of, you know, talking as if you were talking to a child, ending with a threat, now they want two-way communication, ownership, things like that. And instead of having fear, anger, and resentment within the traditional discipline system, people want to ensure that there's a commitment to change behavior. And, you know, if someone doesn't want to make a change, you can put the ball in their court and let them decide. So I thought this chart was pretty neat, and there was no other way to reproduce it other than copy and pasting it. And I sourced it, so that's great. So some of the suggestions related to this approach: avoid talking down to employees. I truly think that this is a great approach in any situation, especially in a disciplinary situation. So you want to ensure that you talk to others as if they are your peers. Find a way to communicate on an equal level. Always show respect and trust when dealing with your colleagues at work. Recognize that treating employees well is the most important thing to instill respect within an organization. So instead of telling someone how to solve a problem, work with them and see how they would like to solve the problem. Always ask for input with your employees. Ask for their opinions and simply involve them in the situation. So quite often, you may be able to have a conversation, consider it a verbal warning, and put the ball back in the employee's court to see what they can suggest doing to make the solution or the situation better. Allow the employee to work it out some way on their own within reason. So you don't want to give full rein to the employee, but you do want to involve them in the process. This has been proven to work much better. You do want to communicate without anger. So this lesson is definitely not just specific to discipline. Always leave emotions out of critical conversations that you have related to the disciplinary process. So approach all situations logically and think about what would a reasonable person do in this situation. Always avoid making people feel like they are being attacked or they did something wrong. So there are some ways to do this, which include using calm words and talking about the root of the problem. I've often heard those involved in human resources functions say that bringing up some positive things at the beginning of a discussion is an easy way to then discuss the root of the problem. You always want to use a firm but soft voice. So you don't want to raise your voice and you don't want to be too quiet. You want to be firm with a soft voice. Avoid being angry during the conversation and make realistic and sensible points. So if it is a moment where you are feeling a little upset over whatever situation it is, take a moment, take a break, do whatever you have to do to recharge and ensure that it's an effective conversation with the employee. Always ensure to have an unemotional confrontation if you can. So this slide is pretty explanatory, but I will go through it anyway. You want to use corrective measures in your disciplinary procedure. So you do not want to use threatening statements. So if you can recall from our poll, 95% of people, believe it or not, are reasonable, and they do want to improve a situation if it's brought to their attention. So never use scare tactics with these individuals to try to get them to display the correct behavior. Always come up with a list of steps that you expect the employee to follow. So create a map of what you're going to go through and how you're going to fix the situation. And you want it to be easy to understand and logical, and you want to have it as simple as possible. Provide detailed explanations where there's improvement required with an employee's behavior, and always focus on the positive. Let an employee know privately if you notice a positive change in behavior. So you may have a conversation with someone one week, the next week they may be making really great strides in changing the behavior. So you want to let them know you notice, and it goes to show that the conversation you did have was worth it. So now this is poll number 2. It's not quite exciting as the first one, the very surprising 95% statistic. This one, I'm just asking you a question now, and I want to see how comfortable you are in having a conversation with an employee around discipline. So I'll get you to select your option there now on the screen. I'm just waiting. Click Jeopardy. Oh, 100%. Great job, everybody. I'm going to share the responses there now. So from our audience, we have 25% very comfortable in having a disciplinary conversation. 65% somewhat comfortable, so that's great. And 10% are not at all comfortable. 0% are totally uncomfortable. So some great stats there, and you know, I know that with experience and with learning new things about the disciplinary process, it can get easier. And those that picked within the 10% that are not at all comfortable, you'd be surprised that that could change, and it just comes with time and experience. I know, you know, 10 years ago, I definitely wouldn't be as comfortable as I am now in having the conversation, but it is only because I've been placed in the situation, at times thrown to the situation, if you will. So some great stats there, and to the 65% that are somewhat comfortable, that's excellent, and 25% very comfortable. So we've got a really great mix, and I'm sure you could tell the audience a little bit about this, and we might even have some time to do that at the end. I'm going to get some examples of, what has made you comfortable. Great. So, moving on. Slide 23, and we're getting pretty close to the end, so we might even end off early, but we can have some time for a little chat at the end. So, always guide the employee. So work through the correctional steps in the disciplinary process. Provide the employee with some information so they can understand why the choice was made to bring up the issue. Ensure that the employee knows that you want them to improve in the future, and this is for their own benefit. So you don't want the employee to make the same poor decisions again, and you are truly helping them, not just you or the organization. You want to get all sides of the story. So always make sure that you check into an issue before disciplining anyone. It can be quite embarrassing if it's a group that is making the issue, come up in the workplace. Make sure that there are no legitimate reasons for behavioral issues. So this could be medical, it could be, it's scary but true, it could be addictions issues, it could be anything. So, be human and simply privately ask if there's anything going on between you and your employee. Never make any snap judgments, so don't draw conclusions quickly. Ensure that you check it out first before you make a decision. It could be that there is a workplace problem and not only one employee is responsible. So you want to check out the situation and have conversations with others if you need to. Always keep it private and confidential. So this is a big part of keeping discipline respectful. And by interviewing employees privately by way of conversation about a situation, it can help make sure that you make the right decision in disciplining someone. You always want to make sure that you finish your disciplinary procedure with a form of positive discipline overall. You want to recognize how hard an employee works and ensure that you recognize positive behavior during the disciplinary meeting. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a good way, to not totally make the employee feel defeated during this type of meeting. It's never easy information to hear. You want to be able to provide some positive things before you talk about the negative. An active management style has been typically known to work best, and it is said to create a stronger bond between the employer and the employee. So being involved, being always having a conversation about expectations, it could be formal, informal. Show that you appreciate your employees and show that you are interested in their success. Some best practices are listed here on the screen. They're pretty self-explanatory, but I'm going to go through them. You should always be consistent in your approach. Make sure that your employees know about organizational policies and procedures. You always want to consistently treat everyone in the same manner. So do to one as you would do to all. ensure that you have good documentation practices in place. So within the disciplinary process, if you do need to write a letter as the second step of the process, ensure to correctly capture the meeting, uh, the information in the letter that was discussed, and place it on the employee's personnel file in a secure location, of course. Always put the employee on notice of the inappropriate conduct through verbal or written statement. So most of you would prefer to get it in writing, but it could also be done as a verbal statement. And going back to documentation, even if you do provide a verbal statement to your employee, you can still document this as a note. For example, you could say, today I discussed this issue with this person, and this was the result. This is what they're going to work on, and it doesn't actually need to be a formal written letter on their file. It can be a conversation. All you need to do is document that you had the conversation. So you want to ensure that you address any infractions timely and appropriately before the issues grow out of control. So it's no good if someone participated in insubordination today and they weren't told about it for another 30 days. You're not going to be as effective in your approach if you do not let them know early. So I think you all know that, but it's always good to hear it again. But that's some of the best practices related to this process. I do want to point out to you that there's a really great resource online from Charity Village. So Charity Village is something that I follow since I've started this position, and I will forever follow this page. They have some really great nonprofit resources, and they have one PowerPoint that's titled Discipline and Dismissal for Nonprofit Organizations, Making the Best of a Difficult Situation. So it's available here, and with the slideshow, you'll be able to actually click on this. And I think I can actually click on it here now if I were to. I'm not going to, but it's a really great slideshow that goes through a lot of this, and it also talks about dismissal in more detail. And the nonprofit sector it's different. Let's be honest, it is a different area. And I think one of the greatest things about the nonprofit sector is that there tends to be a lot of communication, collaboration, time to get together to work on issues. A lot of team approach can be seen, and this is some of the stuff that I've witnessed myself over the last couple of months. Oops, I went and clicked on the link. So just bear with me here. So sorry about that. Easy to do when the link is there in the bottom of the page. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to open up the floor. We do have 20 minutes here now to have a little discussion. I would like to bring us back to what we asked earlier about how you can become comfortable in having disciplinary conversations. And within the theme of this presentation, I would like you all to just check out the question box and make a comment on how it is you can become comfortable in having these conversations. Okay, I'm just seeing now that someone said they can't hear, and that was at 2:08 p.m. So I'm really hoping that people have heard this entire presentation. If someone could please let me know, just so I don't panic here. Okay, so some questions are coming in. People can hear, so thank you. That's great. Okay, so we'll go down through the questions now as we have some time, and I promise you that we'll be out by 3 at the latest. So the first question is, if I am the only other employee, should I ask a volunteer board member to be with me when I am disciplining? So that's a really great question. I don't think it could hurt to have a second person available to witness the discipline. Like anything, you always, respectfully, privately, it might be a great idea to have somebody else sit in on the disciplinary conversation or meeting or witness a letter being put on someone's file. That's a great question. So I don't think it could hurt. If anyone else has any other suggestions related to that, please feel free. Okay, so there's no other comments on that question. But yes, if you're the only person and you'd like to have two people and you've got no other support outside of your board, it'd be a great idea to ask them to step in with you. Are there examples of misconduct that would bring an employer to terminate without progressing through the steps? Absolutely. Some of these would be serious infractions like a serious crime, um, something that would allow you to dismiss someone immediately. And I think they're the no-brainers, I guess. Um, getting charged with an offense that doesn't work with the policies and procedures at the workplace. If the policies and procedures say that someone cannot have a conviction or commit a crime, which most will, those could be examples of where you would go directly to termination, because it could be a sudden thing that could happen. Hope that answers the question. Okay, I'm glad that people could hear the entire presentation, so that's good. I have another question here. Should I have a grievance appeal policy for employees? There should always be a conflict resolution policy, which can also be called a grievance policy. If there is no collective agreement in place, they may not refer to it as a grievance process, but absolutely, you want to ensure that you do have two-way communication and a way for an employee to speak up. So in the past, I've witnessed many different HR functions, and if some of those were disciplined, if the employee absolutely doesn't agree with the discipline, doesn't believe it's true, they don't think they did what's on the discipline, um, there's a way that you can accommodate their opinion. However, if a disciplinary letter is going on their file, there's not much they can do about that. They may not sign it. They may never want to sign a disciplinary letter. It'll still be on their file, and you would put a note to say that the employee did not want to sign. And you could even put some other extra notes on why. And if the employee disputes it, or if there's a conflict of opinion, then they could reply to the letter with their opinion if you wanted to. So you should definitely provide the two-way communication and allow the employee to appeal the decision. Sometimes, the discipline may be reduced. Someone might think that they don't need a written warning, they should only have a verbal warning, and things could generally improve after that. So there's another question. Do I have to give an employee what is placed on their file? Who can I share that with? Only them? You do have to give the employee the right to request their personnel file at any time, from what I've heard, and this has been a general rule. I should be able to know if there's anything on my file regarding me, on my personnel file, even if it is private and confidential. Who can I share that with? Normally it would be the direct supervisor. In some cases, the CEO would have private and confidential information about whatever's on the file, but it should be strictly the employee and the supervisor. There's another question here. How long should I keep disciplinary notes on the file? So should I shred them when the employee leaves our employ? I would never shred a letter. Normally they're kept from a period of either 6 months to a year. Most commonly it's a year, but it's a matter of what you would like to do. Because people do change, and if a disciplinary letter does go on a file, quite often people do make positive changes, and it's not all negative. So they do deserve the opportunity to have a clear file with a timeline of 6 months or to a year. And again, my answers to this, if anyone doesn't agree with it, I would love if you could speak up, but that's what I've come to know throughout my experience and learning. If an employee leaves your employment, it may be safe to keep it for a period of time within, document records, legal rules, I guess, if you're allowed to keep it for a period of so many years. Okay, so I've got one thing here. It says discipline regarding a personal event that could impact the organization. I'm just wondering if that was a question, or if there was anything further you could add to that, or was it a comment about one of the previous questions? Okay, great. So someone else followed up there now. So discipline regarding a personal event that could impact the organization. Can a person be terminated for this? Now, see, this all depends, and you'll hear this a lot. It completely depends on the situation and what has happened, what's transpired, the level of seriousness. So I wouldn't be able to say specifically if someone needs to be terminated, but with that list of misconduct, if someone is, uh, participating in serious misconduct, they can certainly be terminated for something very serious that could impact the organization. If someone goes out and wants to ruin the reputation of a nonprofit organization, that could be considered misconduct. It would be defamation of character or reputation of the organization. Great question. I'm going to go back to that slide. All right, so I would imagine that anyone could be terminated for not following one of these examples of misconduct if they conduct one of these examples. And again, you'll see in like the labor standards legislation that an employer-employee relationship can be terminated at any time without cause as long as the proper notice is given for both sides. But if you're going to terminate with cause, some of these examples may be the reason for termination with cause. It was a clear something clear that was against policy or procedure, something serious. So to answer your question, someone can be terminated for something that could impact the organization. It depends on what your policies and procedures say. So we could talk about that definitely in person if you'd like to. Please reach out. All right, some really, really great questions, and it's actually brought us to about 9 minutes left there now. So are there any other questions or comments on any of the information on these slides? Is there anything you'd like to hear about more or for us to go into more detail about? All right, I don't see anything. Just give it another minute there now, and then you might even get out early today. So that'll be my gift to you today. And again, I'll just take this time while I'm waiting for someone to write in the box. We are going to be having a number of really great workshops this fall at the Community Sector Council. They're all listed on our website. One of the really interesting ones that I'm looking forward to for those in the St. John's area is creating a respectful workplace, and we'll be doing that on October 19th. Another really great one is the webinar that I'm doing the week of the 18th of October. I just have that here. I'll just show you. All right. Okay, and another comment there now. Someone said, thank you for the presentation. This left me realizing that I'm doing better than I thought. So that's really great. Okay, I'm just going to go to our website now, and you should be able to see this on your screen. All of our events, we've got some fabulous events coming up. So the one that I was about to tell you about was another webinar. The next webinar is how to select and score fairly. That's on Wednesday, October 18th. And there's some other really great financial webinars and in-person sessions. So the goal of this project is to be able to reach Newfoundland and Labrador. So even if you see something that might be in St. John's, we do hope to find a way to bring all the learning to all areas of Newfoundland and Labrador, understanding that not everyone can meet in this central location. We have the Creating a Respectful Workplace workshop that you can sign up for on Thursday, October 19th. Some of you may have already signed up. And we've got this really interesting conflict resolution workshop that might relate to a lot of things we talked about today. We have this on October 24th from 2:30 to 4:30, I believe it is, and that's with Tammy Shepard. We're also going to be doing some focus groups, which I think it's good to mention now. Our first focus group will be on November the 16th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and we would love to see some of you on that focus group. I'm actually thinking there's a way that we can include people that aren't here in person, so stay tuned for that. Any other questions before we end off today, or comments? Okay, I don't see any questions or comments. If you do have anything further and you want to reach out, please do. My contact information is here on the screen. These are some of the sources that we used. So you can see it here. Our website is www.cscnl.ca, and my email is there, and you can call us toll free 1-866-753-9860 at any time. Thank you for your time today, and have an excellent evening. Hope to see you all at the next webinar or some of the in-person events. Have a good one.